Live from the Business RadioX studio in Atlanta, it's time for Dental Business Radio, brought to you by Practice Quotient. Practice Quotient bridges the gap between the provider and payer communities. Now here's your host, Patrick O'Rourke.
Hi there, friends of the dental business community. This is your host, Patrick O'Rourke. Thank you for joining us today. This show is brought to you by Practice Quotient, PPO analysis and negotiation. If you feel like you're one of the best providers or the best dentists, best doctors, best oral surgeons, don't you think that you should have the best representation so that you can get the best compensation? Practice Quotient, www.practicequotient.com. So thank you to our sponsor, and also thank you to Harris. And so I would like to introduce my friend, my colleague, Harris Gignilliat of Trillium Partners. And so prior to letting Harris talk, I'm just going to say that this show is always been about the conversations that I have with other professionals that are subject matter experts in their industry. As a business owner, I don't have time to be an expert at everything. And so I find other really, really smart people that are neck deep in their own business. And so I can just ask them what's going on. And that's what this show is going to be about, is what's going on in Harris's world. So Harris, with that, hello.
Good morning, Pat.
How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's cold out there. The winter has come.
Winter has come. You know, I complain sometimes when I'm on the phone. I talk to people all over the country, and I'm like, it's chilly. And they're like, oh, what's the temperature? I'm like, oh, it's like 50. And they're in Cleveland. They're like, it's 10 below, or it's 10. And it'll be 10 below in a month. And I'm like, I'm really sorry about that.
I think we might be giving Cleveland a run for its money this morning. It was in the 20s. There's frost on the ground. It's cold for Georgia.
There was frost on the ground. Yeah, my kids thought it was snow, but I was like, you can't make a snowman with that.
No snowmen yet. It's early.
No, I am hoping for snow.
I am too.
You know, so I am the sledding champion of the woodlands. So nobody can go down that hill faster than me in the entire neighborhood. And that is a challenge to all of you in the woodlands. Okay.
So since we're in holiday season, I have a visual of Chevy Chase on his little sled with the special stuff on the bottom. Is that Pat?
Not far off. Not far off at all. But it is definitely centrifugal force over talent or technique, you know? So Harris, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today. So I get into, I'm very busy as all business owners, but there's been a lot going on in the insurance world that's kept me busy, and I need to take my breaks. And so there's a lot of noise out there, and I actually try to cut out a lot of it, right? And so the whole election thing, and this puzzles a lot of my friends and colleagues, but I totally tuned that thing out. And so when it was election weekend, I went fishing. I was in North Georgia. I was fishing. That's what I was doing. I had no idea what was going on. I knew it would be a little bit of a, episode, or as, the play poop show. That's what my kids would call it. And I think that's, it's still happening, and I'm still kind of ignoring it. We don't necessarily want to get into politics. At the same time, what happens in D.C. and certainly in our Senate race here in Georgia has a lot to do with how the markets are perceived and how they react. And so I really want to kind of start off with that and hand it over to you. And Harris, tell me what I don't know and what a lot of listeners don't know. What's going on? What's the impact of it? Headline first, and then we'll get into details as needed.
Perfect. Well, for the listeners, Trillium Partners is a part of UBS Financial Services, and so we help specifically we help dentists and dental professionals invest either within their practice, with their personal money, and so as you can imagine, the last 30 days have been pretty active in client conversations, and everybody's having a similar question. Mm-hmm. Which is, we see change. How does change affect what I need to be doing? how what is the impact of that change, and specifically with the markets and with my practice. We've been in an environment where for the last 4 years, it's been a pretty I don't want to say anti-regulatory, but it's definitely been less. It's also been an environment where taxes are lower.
I like low taxes.
Most
I
people
like less
do.
regulation.
Yeah. So I think that having those two areas have the wind at your back as a business owner or as a practice owner has been good. So, and a lot of our clients have had some of their best years over the last 4 years. And so, I think seeing change is concerning. But what first of all, I commend you for going fishing during that time frame. I'm jealous. I wish I could have done that.
I'll invite you next time.
You should. I can put a hook on a line.
All right.
But the net is that didn't have that opportunity, and what we're telling clients is you have to be careful to correlate politics, Washington, and the markets as what I call a 1-to-1 correlation. It doesn't work that way. Now, over longer term periods, you can see the impact of what's going on in Washington affect markets. But in the short term, at least, a lot of what's going on can be noise. But going into the elections, there was this prediction of the blue wave, and that we were going to see Biden win, and the Senate was going to flip, and there was going to be this mass movement to more of a Democratic-controlled political situation in Washington. And that with the backdrop of the pandemic, there was a lot of investors that were very nervous. Now, what's happened since then is actually the market has been on fire, especially the U.S. market has been on fire since the election.
It has been.
And it goes to show, and I'll even go back to 4 years ago, it always goes to show that what you think is going to happen doesn't necessarily always happen. Your gut doesn't always lead you to the right answer, especially in investing. And I think these two last elections have been really good examples of that. People forget that before Donald Trump won, and it was a big surprise, there was this belief that if he won, that the markets were going to tank. Because here we have this outsider and non-political, he's going to do all these crazy things. And overnight, the markets were down 1,000+ points.
Sure.
By the next morning, the markets recovered and were up 1,000 points. And then we went on a 4-year run where the economic environment, frankly, was really, really positive, and the markets benefited from that. It's always about, stocks are a reflection of the companies that they represent. And so if more people are drinking Coca-Colas, and if more people are buying Apple phones and iPhones, and if more people are involved in the economy, you're going to see those stocks naturally migrate north. And so that's a great environment. Now what's happened is after the election, the initial belief is that, okay, President Biden's coming in. Here comes, the House is going to stay Democratic, but it's lost a little bit of that control. And now the Republicans are at least have an opportunity to hold the Senate. And so it looks very similar to a gridlock type of environment. And what the market reflected in that was it liked it. It liked the idea that the regulatory tax environment of the last 4 years might actually hang around for a while. And yet we're going to take maybe some of the noise at the top and the tweets and some of that stuff off the table.
Right.
And I think the market liked that too, because that creates a lot of uncertainty when you have that type of, what I call knee-jerk communication coming from Washington.
Right.
And so, as we stand today, November, we just finished November. So the election's November 3rd. We just finished November, and we had the best month in the U.S. stock market since 1987.
Wow. I did not know that.
Market was up, S&P up double digits for the month. So when you look at all of the major indexes that we follow, the S&P being kind of at the top of the list, or even the Dow, for those that are familiar watching the TV news and following the markets, they had incredible months for November. And so October was not a great month. Same with September. So November kind of confirmed to us that I think the market likes the current political situation. Now, we're going to have to watch what happens in Georgia.
Checks and balances. Are you telling me that that's a good idea and people like that?
I think it's not that the people like it, it's investors like it. Because what checks and balances do is it takes the extremes off of the table. And so I look at the situation now. Let's say that the Senate does stay Republican. Well, it's going to be very difficult to get any kind of legislation passed if you've got a bifurcated legislative branch. So I think coming off of a lot of the uncertainty that we've seen, I think the markets responded very favorably to that. Again, we've got to wait till January. If both the seats go Democratic, I could easily see maybe some more volatility coming into the markets. But as an investor right now, it's a very interesting time because, again, lots of change, a lot of uncertainty. We're still in the middle of this pandemic. And although with vaccine news, we have a light at the end of the tunnel that seems to be coming out, there's still some rough days ahead. And so what we're sharing with clients and dental clients specifically is, be nimble, be prepared. It's kind of like when you get on a plane and the pilot, if you get on a plane and you don't hear anything from the pilot and you get about halfway in the air and all of a sudden the plane starts bouncing around, it scares you because you're not prepared for it. And you have that immediate knee-jerk emotional reaction to it. And then you land. And pretty much all the planes land. But that little period of time is very unsettling. But if the pilot comes on at the beginning and says, hey, gang, everybody, we're going to have a little bit of rough air about halfway through. It's going to bounce for about 2 or 3 minutes. Put your seatbelts on. We're going to get through it. Everything's going to be fine. It's a very different experience.
Expectations.
It's all about expectations, and it settles the client. And that's a little bit of what we're doing with our dental clients today is telling them, look, it's going to be bouncy here for a little bit.
Sure.
And especially until we can kind of get on the other side of the pandemic and get all this political noise out of the way. But we're still going to land. And I think if we, kind of looking forward, I see a lot of runway. I see a lot of really good positive opportunity in the markets going forward. And we can talk about that a little bit later. But, I think as difficult as this year has been, to think that the markets are on track to have a double-digit return this year is nothing short of phenomenal.
That's nuts.
And if we were sitting here doing this in March and you said, Harris, what do you predict for the markets? I was, we're going to be down 15, 20, 25%.
That's what you said.
That's what I said?
Yeah. To me.
Recorded?
No, off the record. No, you said it's going to be bumpy. Who knows?
It is going to be bumpy. But
because I'm not Miss Cleo and I can't predict the future.
I'm not either. But and I respect Miss Cleo. She's got a great business. But the net is.
I wonder how her portfolio is doing.
I wonder how she invests. I bet she knows a lot about what's coming down the pike.
I bet she does. Maybe we should have her on the show.
I think we should have Miss Cleo. Yeah. See what she thinks about markets.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my take on the elections and markets. And look, we're in Georgia. As you know, primarily in our dental business specifically, we're in the South, and depending on who you're talking to,
God bless Georgia.
Yeah, depending on who you're talking to, if you're inside Metro, you're having a different conversation and a different outlook on the world and a different outlook on the future than you are if you're talking to somebody in Tifton or somebody in Macon. And that's difficult. That's a challenge because every conversation has a little bit of a different tone. But I'll tell you, the elections created a very hyper sensitive environment, and that trickled into investing too. And
is that right?
Oh, absolutely.
See, I really shouldn't know. Let's speak to the hypersensitivity. I've had too many conversations with people, family and friends, and colleagues that I respect, and they get very Chicken Little, and they're like, the sky's falling and it's going to be da-da-da. And I said, look, man, here's the deal. All right, I grew up in Florida, right, where every hurricane, this is the big one, and it's going to level all of us. All right, Florida's still there, right? Disney World's still there. Miami's still there. South Beach is still there. Tampa, Florida, still there. It's a lot of hype, and I feel that and little embarrassed that as a culture that we're so easily pit against each other over what really seems to be trivial matters. And that's my take on that.
Yeah. I was watching. I'm a big college football fan, and I was watching the Iron Bowl this last weekend and the Alabama-Auburn and that rivalry and how heated it is.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And being in Alabama, I'm a Georgia Bulldog. So when I go to Alabama, it doesn't matter who I'm talking to. I'm the enemy, right? So it's at least we know where the lines are. I don't have to worry. But it's amazing to me. I go into Alabama, and you'll go into a small town in Alabama, and there's the Auburn dentist. And then there's the Alabama dentist, you know, and it's across the board, all across the state. But what I find really interesting is those two entities. It's a heated rivalry. I mean, and that game is such a big deal to them.
Huge.
And when I look at the political environment this last election, I felt like it was Auburn, Alabama. It was two entities that just don't like each other and can't find a lot of common ground. And depending on where you stand, you're going to be on one side of the line or the other. And that battle, that election, whatever, it's a drag out, you know, everything goes. And it's almost kind of the way, going to your point, it's almost kind of the way that we look at the political environment today. It's like my team, my alumni, my team, I'm going to root for them thick and thin. And if you're not a part of that, if you don't believe in that, then I don't want to have anything to do with you. And I think that's dangerous.
I agree.
And I also think that we had a policy for Thanksgiving. We did have some family members that were there. I told them on the front end, no political conversations at the dinner table, period. If you do, you are getting, I don't care if you're the oldest person at the table, you are getting asked to leave because I knew going in we had some differing opinions on the politics and did not even want to go down that road. So
yeah, it's interesting because my opinion has been exactly what I state. Like, I'm not worried. You know, I do what I got to do. If I can't do anything about it, I don't worry about it. And my neutrality or ambivalence, if you will, pisses people off.
Yeah.
You know, and they're like, well, I don't understand how you can't. And I'm like, look, you're getting all worked up.
Which is my exact point. Listen, when I go to Alabama, I'm a Georgia fan. Everybody hates me. It's like being in the neutral zone on a political preference. Everybody doesn't. Now you've kind of created that we both don't like you, right?
Right. I'm like, listen, Uncle Fred, calm down. You're going to have a heart attack.
That's right.
All right. Spewing gravy all over the place. Chill out. Cool breeze.
That's right.
You want to hear a funny Alabama story?
Yeah.
You know, so I grew up in Florida, and when I got to Georgia, right, it's a little bit of a culture shock. I love it here. I really do. And this is where I've chosen to raise my children. Now, I was still in the insurance industry at the time, and so we had to build a network, right? And so they sent me over there to Alabama. I'd never been to Alabama before in my life. And so I go to a very small town dentist, and I went in there, and I don't remember the name of the town. I probably wouldn't say if I did. And it was a little bit of an older practice, like older equipment, and the gentleman was there, and he said, he kind of gestured to his office and wait for me there. And I said, okay, no problem. So I'm sitting there, I'm waiting. He comes in, and he's got an apron on. There's like some blood on it. You know, it's like, dude, it was a serious place. Anyway, so he sits down, right? You know, he hasn't said a word, and he just looks at me, and he goes, Todd Wargle. I said, I'm sorry, sir. Can you repeat that? Todd War Eagle. And I said, well, I promise I'm not dense. All right. So just one more time. I'm watching your lips. Can you repeat that? I have no idea what he's saying. And he goes,
Wargle. That's what he says. Wargle.
Yeah. and so he looks at me like I'm from another planet and says, Todd or War Eagle. And so at this point, I kind of dart my eyes around, and I see an elephant somewhere on the side of the wall, and I go, Todd. And he goes, all right, then carry on.
But there's a level of truth. That is, I mean, we talk about it in joking matter.
But very true story.
It is a real thing. Yeah. It is a real thing. So, but look, at the end of the day, for folks looking at it from an investment standpoint, there were a lot of people coming out of 2008 and 2009 who didn't like the political environment. And they invested behind that belief, meaning I'm not going to take any risk. I'm going to keep money in the money markets. And we had come off of the Great Recession. and frankly, they lost and they missed one of the greatest
Yeah,
10-year opportunities. Yeah. And you don't get those, you only get a couple of those a lifetime. And so my hope is that people aren't investing based on their political beliefs, because to your point, the sun did come up this morning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did have my coffee this morning, and I'm going to probably have lunch this afternoon at some point. And my kids go to school. Life will go on. It might be a little bit different. And, you know, I'm not saying to be ambivalent to the political environment, and especially when it comes to investing, you do have to take that into consideration.
But it's not the only consideration.
But it's not the one-to-one.
Right.
And that's the mistake that I see a lot of folks make.
I like that. So it's not the one-to-one correlation. So great news for all of you guys out there who still have some hard feelings. It's time to get over it. We just had Thanksgiving, and, you know, at Thanksgiving, it's a time to be grateful. And, you know, I think that also needs to be taken into account. And at a time in a country where I truly feel that all of us should be coming together to have outside forces pit us against each other. It is silly to me. You know, hark back to like 9/11. Remember the yellow ribbons?
100%.
You know,
100%. At that point in time, we knew who the enemy was. It didn't matter who your political beliefs were, and everybody was kind of aligned. You know, we've got a silent enemy that we've been fighting for almost a year, and it's a shame how politicized that got, and how you know, I think it all those things kind of came together at a really bad time, and I think it's a reflection of just how divided we are. And I agree with you. I think that we've got to find some common ground. And, you know, there's another kind of thing that's going on, which is, you know, we're seeing these. Not to go down another rabbit hole, but we see.
Go ahead. That's what we're here for.
The effect of social media. You know, I laugh. I won't out them, but I have a family member who spends an inordinate amount of time on social media.
Uncle Fred,
as we'll call him for the show. And Uncle Fred, every conspiracy theory, every issue that comes out, and he's just dialed into all of it. And the sad part about Uncle Fred is that Uncle Fred's his mental state is not good. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of folks out there that are like that. They've gotten sucked into this, and it's causing tertiary issues in their life. It's making them negative, depression, suicide rates, or all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And I think that there's there's a lot of positive. There's a book that I read 2 years ago. It's probably one of the best books I've read in a long time. It's called Factfulness. And what Factfulness, it's a guy that did a TED Talk. He's from Europe, so he's not from the U.S. But
aren't they all socialists in Europe?
Well, you would think so. But this guy's and
I'm just kidding.
I don't know. I don't know what his political beliefs are. But the premise of the book is how much better life is than we give it credit for. And Amen. It goes through all these statistical, whether it's poverty rates, whether it's literacy rates, and it's all across the globe. And he makes a case for life today is really, really good. Mm-hmm. And the things that our grandparents and great-grandparents dealt with, we don't deal with. And even with this pandemic, I mean, you look back at the Spanish flu in 1918, we had 100 million people at that time. And so almost 700,000 people died out of 100 million in 1918. That'd be the equivalent today of almost 2 million people dying from the Spanish flu. And not that 270,000 is not a big number, but you've got to give credit to the fact of science and medicine and the ability to fight something like this. And it kind of goes back to your point. I feel like that, people have gotten divided, and through that, it causes us to be more negative to each other. And we pit these kind of me versus you, or your belief versus my belief, instead of kind of finding more common ground. And I think that's detrimental. I think it's detrimental to people's psyches. I think it's detrimental to families. It's detrimental to just kind of society in general. So my hope is maybe, and I'm sure there's people that would be on this radio show that would blame one side or the other for that, and maybe there's a little truth to that. But maybe an outcome of what's happened here is when this is all said and done. I've got one of my business partners. He came in my office yesterday. He said, "You know what I thought about? I thought about after this summer, when all this is over with, everybody's going to be in a mood to party."
There you go.
I hope he's right.
Right?
I hope he's right. And I hope everybody has a really good excuse to go do something fun or take that trip that they didn't take or whatever, and that there's maybe an upliftingness that comes out of this. I do believe that with every negative thing that happens, there's always a positive that comes out. Maybe that's the positive, is that we party like it's 1999, Pat.
Amen. I love 1999. That was a good year, baby. It just occurred to me that maybe one of the issues here is because of all the social distancing that we can't hug it out.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to hug it out, right? Everything will be all right.
Got to hug it out.
And, the sky is not falling. I try to find things to be grateful for every day. I am happiest when, I make my kids laugh,
Yeah.
That makes me happy. Believe it or not, it's just in Florida, sunsets make me happy. And that sounds really kind of,
I'm a sunset guy too.
Yeah.
My wife makes fun of me about it, but I will stop what I'm doing for a good sunset, no doubt about it.
Because when you're looking up there, and when I used to live in Florida, and you're in the grind and you're stuck in traffic, and you look up in the sky, the sunset's down there every day. It's just a work of art, and no matter what's happening, you just you look up there, and I always felt it was like God's way of saying, "Hey, I can do this. Your problem's not that big."
Yeah, I think I also have a little bit of an element of I made it through another day.
Right.
It kind of signifies I made it through another day. Yeah, it's a good thing.
I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, you woke up, all right? You woke up, you had coffee, you have indoor plumbing, you didn't have to go outside, right? And you know what? It's a great day to have all of your appendages. And everybody kind of stops and they look at me and they're like, and I just smile and look at them. And
you start to sing Kumbaya or anything like that? Do you kind of?
Not yet, I mean, you have to get. No, I haven't got that far. Because, I don't think that I'm overly, like sunshine and daydreams, but at the same time, I think that like pity and, kind of dwelling on things that you can't do anything about is a waste of time.
Yeah.
So that's who I am, I suppose. And anyway, we'll get off of that topic. Sunshine and daydreams.
Are your dental clients feeling happy, or are they feeling pitiful, you think?
I think our clients they're doing well. So that's kind of the difference. We tend to represent more established practices because our job, really the basic premise of what we do here is that we have to go convince insurance companies to pay our clients more than they're going to pay everybody else. And I know this sounds crazy, Harris, but they're just not in a hurry to do that. And so, they tend to be established. So the very surprising thing to me was, there's a shutdown, and we've had to curtail the strategies and customize the strategies probably for every single client at least once this year. And everybody's kind of worried, right? At the same time, then they open back up. Now they're busy. I would say that our clients as a whole, and that's why my anecdotal doesn't mesh with what I'm hearing from like the ADA and what I'm hearing from some of the other studies that I respect and I'm sure are totally, legit. Just simply because of the people that I talk to is not a reflection of the entire industry as a whole. Yeah. What are you seeing out there?
I had this exact same conversation earlier this week at lunch with kind of a dental centric peer who's in the software business.
Mm-hmm.
And, his comment was, because I asked him a similar question, and he said, well, 20% of dental practices will be out of business this time next year. That's what our data is showing us, 20%.
Wow.
And I said, I find that very hard to believe. I said, I have a lot of clients that I think were at that retirement red zone. I'm 62, I'm thinking about it, or I'm 65, or I'm 70, and I should have probably done something. This created a catalyst for them to put their practices on the market.
For sure.
But that was part of a natural evolution. It's just they kind of maybe got off the fence a little bit earlier, or maybe got motivated a little bit more to have those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But, my 40 and 50-year-old dentists, I just don't see them. I mean, I'm having similar conversations like what you're talking about. They're having, relatively speaking, really good years.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the slack from the shutdown got picked up over the summer and into the fall. Now they're all scared about another shutdown,
yes,
which is a legitimate concern, but they're doing really well. But the gentleman I was eating with, he said, be cognizant of one thing, because you're interfacing with dentists that have retirement plans, that have investments, that are, probably a little bit more mindful of their financial picture. That's not all dental practices.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of dental practices out there that, frankly, were not doing that well going into a COVID environment, and then that got exposed. And, you couple that with the DSO private equity environment. What you've done is you've kind of created a perfect storm. And we've had these conversations through some of our networking meetings and such, as that, there was a period a couple of years ago where it felt like the DSO wave was starting to slow down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And, and we've seen different cycles of DSO through multiple decades where things get really hot and then they kind of slow down. And a lot of it's based upon liquidity and interest rates and
Sure.
the appetite for private equity.
Mm-hmm.
But right now is a perfect storm, because for DSOs, at least, if you own a DSO or if you're in that marketplace, the world is your oyster, because there's a lot of practices that are, frankly, in this kind of hanging on by a thread, and they need an out, and DSOs are providing a very easy out,
right? And a check,
and hey,
you don't have to manage people anymore. There's a lot that goes on with running a business that's a bit of a hassle, and that some people are burnt out on, I think. And that's what I'm seeing, and I certainly hear in the pitches. And, full disclosure, we have, independent clients, and we have, larger, corporate clients. And sometimes I have heard some independent folks, kind of rail against the boogeyman of, corporate dentistry. And I'm like, that's not your biggest problem. I mean, you just focus on your own business, and you don't have to worry about that, or the election for that matter, or anything else. You do what you do well, and you'll be just fine, but focus on you and stop worrying about things that you can't control.
Yeah.
It's always kind of my point to them. I feel like there's a crescendo of different, and for the right reasons, all the reasons that you mentioned. There's folks looking to partner and or sell. There's some folks that are leaving the market, and then there is also the private equity. I thought some of that money may find itself in other places. Not so, and it's I think that it is definitely here to stay. I am excited about some of the different things that I am seeing from DSOs. A little bit more organized. I had a very interesting conversation yesterday with some folks up north about medical dental integration, and that to me that's the next phase, and that's where putting that puzzle together, if you can do it, is fascinating to me.
I agree, and I think that there's an interesting kind of, to use the term crescendo. There's an interesting kind of phenomenon, I think, going on in the dental industry, where, and it somewhat kind of replicates what's going on in the country. Outside of the urban areas, where you have family practices, in certain cases might be 2 or 3 generations, and that dentist and that dental practice is a part of the community. Mm-hmm. They're an integral part of that community. And the bedside manner and the chairside manner, and how are your grandkids doing, and that kind of stuff is really important. And so I don't know how a corporate environment can replicate that personal community touch, but I also see the disadvantage being is that DSO, and especially the large DSOs, are going the other end of the spectrum, where they're going what I call futuristic. They're using AI. They're using technology to market and to really drive business towards their practices. And both models are good models.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if AI and that type of environment, the auto call and the auto scheduling and all of the different software programs that dental practices see today, does it make its way out of the large urban areas into more, what I call rural dental practices?
Good question.
Yeah, I don't know. But that's where I feel like the rubber's kind of meeting the road right now. We're getting close to that. In the next 10 years, how we interface with dental practices is going to change dramatically. And you can see it in all the different, even in the specialty spaces. What's Invisalign doing to ortho practices? I mean, that's a Smile Direct. That's a huge,
very big disruptor.
And
for sure.
And so, how do those two entities kind of come together, and where will be the compromise? I think that's going to be the really interesting thing to see over the next 5 to 10 years with dentistry is that marriage between the high tech, mega corporate, everything has a metadata to it, versus mom and pop. Come on here, let me hug your face, and roll Tide, War Eagle.
Right. See, but I think that healthcare is inherently local, and I think that for every person that says yes, there's going to be a person that says no, and that's just how human nature is. And as a self-proclaimed contrarian, that's kind of how I roll. If you look at the medical space right now, when the ACA or Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, when that happened, all right, that was a sea change. All right, that is a material shift. That was a big, big event. And then you had all of the ACOs created, right? And so you have all of the money in private equity, everybody consolidated. So and it's been this way for several years now, by the way. There's two camps, right? You have I've already been bought, right? I'm part of Piedmont. I'm part of Emory. I'm part of Wellstar here locally, right? And then you have the other camp, which is never going to sell in my cold, dead hands, right? Now, my personal physician, I told him if he goes into an ACO, he's going to lose me as a patient. And, I'm pretty direct. I mean, anybody who's ever met me or talked to me for longer than 10 minutes, I don't beat around the bush. And I told my doctor, I said, look, I don't even like you. I don't like you that much at all. You're always telling me what I can't do. All right. I like you to tell me something I can do. Drink more water. That doesn't count. Look, but I trust you. I do. And it's very hard to get into that trust in something that obviously living is pretty important to me. But at the same time, I'm in that guy's hands. I trust him. I don't, anything that happens behind the scenes to me I trust that guy. And I do think that there's a difference. I've heard the pharmacy comparison before.
Yeah.
I still think there's a big difference between who puts fingers in your mouth and who's, putting pills into a bottle. I could be wrong, and I think time will tell. Ultimately, for our listeners that are here, you have a lot of young guns and entrepreneurs that are building their own practices. Some of them are buying practices. You have the emerging DSOs, and I could go on forever and do a whole show on what you're not thinking about. Look out. All right. So you can't get credentialed tomorrow and get high fees, by the way. But more importantly, for the other listeners that are sitting on a nice practice, how do you feel? Like what characteristics or criteria should folks with established practices think about to sell or not? If you want to comment on that.
What should they think about?
Yeah.
Well, so
what are your clients thinking about? Because I'm sure they come to you and they say, hey, look.
They do. So it's interesting. Again, I can give you kind of two examples.
Please.
One is part of why I love dentistry and love working in this industry and helping dental practices and helping dental professionals is dentistry as an industry is a really great industry. I mean, you see all the report, U.S. News and World Report always call it, it's the number one profession, and you still earn a great living. You can still be a great member of your community. And I think it's one of the last industries that still has that family element. I can't tell you how many of our clients, either their parents were a dentist, their kids are a dentist, their brother's a dentist, they met their wife at hygiene school, all those. There's this kind of interesting connectivity with dental that doesn't really exist a lot in other industries that I see. So that's pretty special. And one of my best friends, his dad was a dentist, and he grew up wanting to be a dentist. He was, they're very close, and he went in and has joined his dad's practice, has bought his dad out. So now his dad's kind of going into retirement as he's taking on the next kind of wave or next generation. And he's a great dentist, but to see that and to watch that dream kind of come alive and to see both of them being successful is really, it's heartwarming. It makes you feel good about what dentistry is. And they're both extremely connected in their community. One's in politics. Dad is now in politics, and he's on boards at the hospital and nonprofits and doing a lot of work in the community where I grew up. And so, I think that's important. Now, the other side of that is the dentist that got us involved in dentistry. So just kind of backstory, just real quick. Is,
how did you get into this wacky world we live in?
I did not go to school. I didn't go to high school thinking I can't wait to invest dentist money. When I grow up, I'm going to be a dentist. It was very kind of haphazard. And frankly, the relationship that we were trying to start was with the CPA Association. We were trying to get in with the Georgia Society of CPAs and got all the way kind of to the ninth inning and backed up. But we had this idea of creating an affinity with an association specific to an industry and dentists. We had a connection. We had a client who was a dentist up in Woodstock. And he was on the board of the Georgia Dental Association, and he came to us and said, hey, the Georgia Dental Association is looking to form an endorsement and a partnership with a financial entity. And this is back in the 2000, 2001, 2002, the dot-com bubble had burst, and surprisingly enough, there were a lot of dentists that were spending time during their lunch breaks day trading stocks. It was a hobby. And unfortunately, that can be an expensive hobby when things don't go your way. And so the executive director said, I'm getting tired of taking calls where one of our members has had to either come out of retirement or is in really bad financial situation because they're doing all this stuff on their own. And that was kind of where this all got brought up. But this dentist in Woodstock introduced us and said, here's this group that does retirement plans for large companies. But they say they can actually drill that down to a dental practice and do you want to listen? So they actually did a full proposal, went to different states. Florida already had this, and a couple other states already had relationships like this 20 years ago. But we presented something that was really unique. But that Woodstock dentist was the one that, without him, we would not. He was our in. He was the one that kind of got us connected in. And then we had a couple other people that we knew that were involved as well that kind of helped put good words in. That dentist just sold his practice, and he's got sons that are not in dentistry, and he sold to a DSO. And he needed to maximize that transaction.
Sure.
And he's exactly like what you just described. Doesn't want to do the day-to-day, doesn't want to deal with the staff and all of the stuff that comes up and and he just wants to be in the mouth for this next 5 to 7 years. Found a partner in a DSO environment. He can continue to work. He still owns his building. So it actually worked out really well for him. So
I've seen it work out quite well.
So kind of going back to your original, I have a little bit of a bias, and my bias is because of watching my friend and watching our clients who have been able to stay independent. I love that model, and I love the entrepreneurial aspect of it. And I'm fine with I think it's great if a dentist wants to open up multiple practices in multiple locations and build a little mini DSO. I see benefit to that. Where I get challenged sometimes, and I tell people this all the time, is I'll go and I'll be traveling and I'll go to Macon or I'll go to Augusta or I'll be in Rome, and I'll pass one of the big mega DSOs. And so I'll go in on Google reviews, or I'll go search and see what that looks like. Like what is that? What are people saying about those entities? Because I'm frankly looking at how is it going to impact my client who's also in that market. Mm-hmm. And what I tell them all the time is exactly what you said. Worry about your dentistry. Worry about taking care of your patients and making sure they have the best experience, and take care of your staff. Because if you take care of your staff's going to take care of your patients.
Amen.
And so don't worry about the fact that so-and-so dental's down the street. And then I'll show them, and the reason why I'm confident in that is look at the reviews here. There'll be 30 bad reviews for that dental that DSO dental practice, and one good review online.
Right.
That model's got to change. And that's a different kind of down in a different rabbit hole. But that model has to change, because I think people, to your point, it's about trust. Mm-hmm. And the person that asks me about
earn it.
Yeah, and it goes back to that mom and pop we were talking about earlier. That person that asks me about my grandkids and wants to hug my face and gives me that personal touch is going to have an easier way of getting to my trust. It's the old saying, I don't care about how much you know until I know how much you care.
Right.
And I think that there's a little bit of that goes on in the dental world. And so until the DSO model can humanize, or until the financial metrics change to where the mom and pops can't survive, I still think there's a place for that. And the only caveat I'll say to that is that, I was mentioning like the Tiftons and those, there are little boutique type stores in those small towns.
Woodstock's not a small town. Tifton.
Tifton.
Oh.
And Tifton's not a small town. It's growing.
Think TiftonTourism.com.
Cordial.
Oh, yeah.
Or for my family's from Montezuma, Georgia. Have you ever been to Montezuma, Georgia before, Pat?
I actually have been.
You have been to Montezuma, Georgia?
I have been everywhere in this state.
People in Montezuma, Georgia used to go, there was I
didn't spend a lot of time there, but I've definitely been there.
Growing up, they used to go to what they called the Big G. The Big G was the big discount box store. Or they would have, Jerry's, where you went and bought your stuff, your Christmas gifts. You went to, or if you went to eat a hamburger, you went down to Troy's downtown. It did the square hamburgers like the Christmas. But when you go to Montezuma, I can tell you there are Amazon packages being delivered to Montezuma, Georgia today. And so the reason I bring that up is that I think that even in small towns, if the convenience and the cost metric hit a certain point, going back to your comment about trust, there's a level of folks that will deviate from trust,
sure,
for cost,
absolutely,
and convenience. And so that's going to be the question, I think, is does DSO get to that kind of that tipping point where cost and convenience can overlay the mom and pop trust?
That's a very good analogy in contrast. I like that. The small towns. Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. And so it kind of just goes right back to the providers or the dentists, the owners themselves. You got to stay on top of your game.
And you have to marry tech. You can't be anti-technology. You can't be anti.
Yeah, that's like being, I don't know, anti-American, anti-breathing. I don't like breathing. So if, anybody who uses Amazon, you can't be against technology. And it makes your life easier. If you have a cell phone, that's like somebody with, I don't want to use that cell phone. I would much prefer to use the one that has a cord and connect it to the wall.
Yeah. And there were people you and I know, there were people that were like that for a while,
Yeah, Nana, looking at you.
That's right.
I know you got that phone. I can when you press the button. It's
be careful when you give Nana the phone though, because that means you're going to have to teach her how to use it, and then you become her IT specialist on top of that too. That's a dangerous job.
That's what my son's for. Dylan O'Rourke, IT specialist. I'm going to set up an LLC for him actually. So this has been great. How are we doing on time? Hold on, let me look at my producer John Ray.
Yeah.
John Ray says we're good, so I can wrap up like this all day. one of the things that, I like about you, I like many things about you, Harris, but one of the other things that impressed me when I first met you is a lot of your humanitarian efforts that you do. And you do this really kind of under the radar, but I just like to, bring that up as something that I respect and admire about you. And so can you just, kind of briefly tell us where your passion is, where you're giving back?
Yeah. So, and I give you credit, Pat. You nailed the last name. That's at the beginning. It did take a little bit of training, but you got it. But if you look up Gignilliat, my family comes from. And by the way, when you have a last name like mine, you better know where it comes from, because if you don't, you're going to sound really stupid. So I learned that at an early age. You better know where this comes from.
It comes from the Bible.
Yeah,
Ezekiel chapter 3.
Well, there is a religious connection here. Is that my family were French Huguenots that were persecuted, and they escaped France and went to Switzerland. And Switzerland, the area that my family was from, was actually annexed from France into Switzerland. It's right around Lake Geneva. But if you know the history around Huguenots are have always been known to be very community oriented, give back. It's kind of in the blood, and so that's partly where I'll answer that question is I think it just comes from my heritage and the fact that my family, I grew up in an environment where, my grandfather was very involved in the local, I grew up in Gainesville, Georgia. There's a thing called Good News at Noon, which is they provide services to underprivileged entities. And frankly, the dental industry has joined in with that and is very involved with Good News at Noon, which is really something that's absolutely fantastic to watch. But it was taught to me as a kid. I mean, I can remember my grandfather getting my brother and I during a summer, and us going down to the Good News warehouse and getting the paint out and painting walls for 2 hours. And I can remember my dad donating and being involved in the community, and same with my mom too. So that part of it is something that I was very blessed to be taught at an early age, and I'm trying to get my kids, trying to keep that, pay it forward and keep that going. But I think for a lot of the folks, I'll tell the story because I think people give, and I think this time of year is a prime example where people give because they feel like, okay, this is the right thing to do, or, I'm supposed to be giving, or I'm supposed to be involved. But they make that donation, or they do that community service, or they do something, and then it's done. They feel good about it, and they move on. And my story is a little different because, as I mentioned, my dad he retired. He sold a small business, and after he retired, he went and started building habitat homes in my town, and it was through our church. And so I'll give you the short story, but because I know we're about to run out of time, but he was building habitat homes, and he met a group of guys, and they were going in, and the church had donated a plot of land, and they were building lots, or they had lots, and they were building houses on these lots. And so right before, I guess it was the year after he sold his business, he was spending all this time doing that. And then the week of his 60th birthday, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And 6 months later, he was gone, and which was very detrimental for us, probably one of the worst things I've ever gone through in my life. And because my dad and I were very close. And so after that was over with, thank you. After that was over with, remember I said, all bad things, there's good that comes out of them. So this is a great example. After that happened, the pastor of the church approached us and said, hey, we've got one last lot that's left. And it's a horrible lot. It's got horrible runoff. We probably don't need to build a house on it. And we've run out of funds. There's no more money left to dedicate. But we thought, you know what, your dad was so involved with this. Would you like to build a house in his honor on this lot? And would you be willing to donate the down payment to get the house started? Because every habitat house has to have a kind of a down payment to get it started. And then the person who's getting that house has to pay some into it. You get donations. It's a lot of hands go into getting a habitat house built.
Gotcha. I did not know that.
And I said, absolutely. I said, under one condition. And the one condition was just that our family would be able to work on the house, and we would be able to dedicate days for the family to come work on the house. And so he said, okay, yeah, but we can do that. So fast forward, we end up building the house. We put the roof on the house in July, which if you've ever done roofing work in July in Georgia, it'll make you appreciate your education. But when the house was done, we did the dedication to the family, and it was a single mom who had 5 kids. And Warwick Dunn, who was the running back here for Atlanta Falcons, donated
drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
That's right. His mom was killed, and she was a police officer, and so he used his community outreach to find families in need, and he donated all of the inside, all the beds, the utensils, all of the utility, all that stuff was donated. So when the house they moved in, it was fully furnished.
He's a good man,
great man, unbelievable what he's done. And so we were there for the ceremony, saw the family go in. Everything was wonderful. Local news was there. And then that was it. And so that was in 2006. So 2016, I'm reading ESPN between conference calls at work, and there is a picture of a young guy who's from my hometown. His name is Deshaun Watson. And Deshaun played football for Clemson, won a national title, got drafted by the Houston Texans. And on that picture, he was still at Clemson at the time. This was his senior year. There was a picture of him building a habitat house on ESPN. And he had a hammer in his hand. So I go and I'm reading the article, and it's talking about, and of course he was from my hometown. So I thought, this is cool. I'll read it. So I'm reading the article, and I get down to the bottom, and it's talking about how his story and how he had gone trick-or-treating. His mom had found a habitat tag. They were living in the projects, and she had filled out the paperwork and had gotten designated, and he had grown up, and he quoted as saying that was the change in his life that gave him the opportunity to do what he did and to be who he was. And I get down to the bottom of the article, and I still get I get the tingles when I talk about this. I get at the bottom of the article, and there's a picture, and the picture is my dad's house of the one that we built.
That's awesome.
And so,
bravo.
Yeah. And so after that, we had some connectivity. The year after, they did a whole, NBC did a whole story on him and the house. And I got to go back and see his mom and aunt. And the point of that whole story is that the blessing for us was the fact that we actually got to see the impact of that community involvement. You got to see it from point A to point Z.
It's profound.
And now he's got a foundation, and he's doing the same thing and building habitat homes and donating to other friends. So the spider web has just gotten all from, again, something that was really negative in my life. And so I tell that story because, again, this time of year, you never know where that $10 donation's going. You never know what that hour of community service is doing for a family. But I'm here to tell you, it can have a very profound impact. And if you are blessed enough to be able to see it all the way through or stay involved, the payoff at the end sometimes can be absolutely incredible.
That's awesome. That is a terrific story. Harris, thank you for sharing that with me.
You're welcome.
And with our listeners. Good job, Deshaun, giving it back, paying it forward as well. And, to everybody else out there who we are not talking about, this is the time of year to do that. And giving back to me, as I've gotten older, I can tell you that it's pure joy. And so if you're feeling down or you're feeling frustrated today, why don't you just go be nice to somebody? Even if it's as simple as a compliment or bringing a cup of coffee to, one of your elderly neighbors who's been shut in because they're scared of the sickness out there. Do something nice and you'll feel good about yourself and much better about your day. You make that a habit, I promise you your life will be a little bit better. So before we go, I want to thank our sponsor again, Practice Quotient, PPO analysis and negotiation, and the top tier PPO analysis and negotiation firm for top-tier dental professionals. They're at www.practicequotient.com, or you can call their offices at 470-592-1680. A couple things that you mentioned there that we want to make sure that we mention on the show is the Georgia Dental Association right around the corner, because we are broadcasting live in Atlanta, Georgia. We could probably roll a golf ball and go hit Scott and Frank. What's up, boys? How y'all doing?
That's right. Give the shout out to my friends of the Georgia Dental Association. They are the reason for the season when it comes to our business, and we appreciate their partnership very much. Same with Alabama as well. Zach Studstill, Michelle Warren, and Coella Jenkins in Alabama also have been great partners for us without that association. And if you ever want to find our team, or learn about what we do and how we help dental professionals, both investing in their retirement plans and their practice and also personally, if they need financial planning, things like that, go through your association, go through that state association, either the GDA or ALDA. Our information's all over their website, easy to find. I'm the guy with the crazy last name.
That's right. Harris G is the man in Alabama and Georgia when it comes to money. And you know, the one thing that I like that you guys do, so that's, we're peas in a pod in so many ways, but one of the things is that we speak the same language and I understand exactly what you're doing. And they're bringing institutional investing prowess, to, really small business owners. And you would not have access to that without your respective organized dentistry, associations. And so you should, thank them. And I would like to thank all of you listeners out there in listener land. I appreciate your time and hope that you have a wonderful day and afternoon. Until next time, this is your host, Patrick O'Rourke.